perfect activists, but millions of imperfect ones.
Young people, well, we're the future. We've got everything to fight for. Hi everyone, welcome back to The Imperfect Activist. In this episode, we're talking about something that is close to my heart and close to my Saturday mornings, the fight for equality in women's sports. From the football pitch to rugby field, there's been huge progress, but the question remains, are we there yet? Just a few weeks ago, the England women's football team made history, winning the UEFA Women's Euro 2025 back-to-back. And here in the Southern Hemisphere, the Springbok women's rugby team have been making headlines of their own, climbing the world rankings, breaking into new tournaments, and proving they belong on the global stage. To explore this conversation, I'm joined by someone who works right in the thick of it on the sidelines. Bernice, a passionate rugby advocate and sports media for fun, who spends her weekends filming, producing content for men's rugby, while trying to carve a space for more women in that male-dominated world. So, Bernice, welcome to the podcast. For those who don't know you yet, can you tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do in the world of sports, and what's your day-to-day job as well?
Yeah, sure, Lucy. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I live in Pretoria, South Africa, and I have lived in Pretoria, South Africa my whole life. I'm also a very big Shark supporter. So for those that do know rugby and are in the rugby world, you will know. So yeah, very big Shark supporter. I currently work in recruitment, so I still have my corporate day job, but the goal is to eventually work in sports, hence like all of the fan interviews at matches. And yeah, we also have our podcast on the side, which I have my UK partner with me, Tash. And yeah, I'm sure you guys will hear a lot more about Tash in the future. But yeah, so we host that together. And yeah, I actually know you, Lucy, through the URC WLA. So the URC hosted a Women's Leadership Academy. And that's essentially how Lucy and I met each other.
We met, I want to say like February or April. It's somewhere like that. But we met online. I've never actually flown to South Africa to see it. Maybe you never know. A little holiday and to see men's rugby. You never know.
Exactly. You should come over. It's the best weather, best people.
And what made you go to like men's rugby and like what's your passion for that game specifically?
Yeah, so men's rugby, I think in South Africa, like rugby is such a big part of our culture, and rugby is something that I just really grew up with. It's been part of my life since I was a little girl. And people always, so if you stay in Pretoria, you know that people in Pretoria actually support the Blue Bulls. So it's not that common for people in Pretoria to support the Sharks, even though they are, there's a mix all over the country. And people always ask the question like, why are you a Shark supporter? Why don't you support the Bulls? And so when I was very, very young, my dad got a job in KZN, which is like the home of the Sharks. And long story short, he ended up not taking it, got a better opportunity in Pretoria, and we ended up staying. But at that time, I was so young, I didn't have a rugby team. So I decided, okay, I'm going to choose the Sharks since we're moving there. And yeah, like I said, keep in mind, I was super young, I was like 6 or 7. So it just goes to show that, just from a very young age, it was part of like my weekends, and it was kind of like a bonding experience as well. So between me and my family and my friends and I, and as you grew older and as you got to actually watch the games, I think that was quite like a big turning point. It's like your first Springbok match, or watching provincial rugby at Loftus. Yeah, I think I just always had this passion for rugby. I think I used to look at like the women in sport and the presenters in sport, and I looked at them and I was like, that's where I want to be one day. Like, I also want to like work in sport and work in sports media, and just purely for the passion. Yeah, I think it's like, long story short, I think it's always just been a part of like who I am. Like, I really can't imagine my life without rugby.
And in terms of like representation of women in like the sports media, and especially in rugby in South Africa, Have you seen like any progress throughout your life of more women going in those spaces, or do you feel like it's still an ongoing battle for those women to get in those spaces in sports media?
Yeah, Lucy, I think it's difficult. Like, I think especially in South Africa, like in the UK, you have Ilona Meyer that's done great things for rugby, not only for the USA, but just for women's rugby in general. And I think in South Africa it is a bit limited. We are not part yet and always of your big competitions. We still sometimes have to qualify for the competitions and everything. But I think we are making progress. So, for example, with the Bulls Daisies, they are the provincial team in South Africa. And they have signed professional contracts. So they are contracted as professional rugby players. So they're being paid a salary and they are labeled as a professional rugby player, which I think is a step in the right direction. And I think that is probably something that's motivating the other clubs to do that, or to at least think in that direction, or starting to think in that direction. So there's definitely some progress, but I think it's kind of baby steps. There's still a lot of work to do. And yeah, I think on the marketing side of things, like there's really a lot of work that needs to be done, and work that needs to go into women's rugby in South Africa.
Do you think like comparing to like the UK side of things, when you see
Mm.
like women's football after the Euros 2022 just went up, staggering amount, like double,
Yeah.
triple the number of girls playing football. Do you think if that would happen with like South Africa women's rugby, to achieve maybe that achievement, do you think that would have the same effect in South Africa, or do you think that would change things?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see what would happen if, you know, there is such a big achievement. I remember when just a few weeks ago when South Africa played a warm-up match against the Black Ferns and they won the Black Ferns. It was very big, you know, it blew up like the internet, and even the big rugby pages like SA Rugby Mag, and you know, they all shared the achievement, which is great because I think we do need to acknowledge it, because the more we acknowledge the achievements as well, like the more people are going to become aware of the achievements, and more people would watch it. But I think there's definitely some progress. So, for example, I remember with the Springboks Italy test, they actually let the Springboks women play like the pre-match, which is great because essentially everyone's already there for the Springbok versus Italy match. So why not, you know, bring the Springboks women into it, give them that exposure. So I think we are moving in the right direction. I think it might just take a little longer for us to get there.
And what do you think when it comes to like sports media and like broadcasting covering? Why do you think women's rugby is still so overlooked comparing to like women's football that's just blown up? Women's rugby is still like lagging a bit behind. Why do you think like you've talked about like marketing and the lack of marketing in like women's sports comparing to men's sport, but why is that so overlooked maybe already in South Africa, but also in England?
Yeah, I think it's actually such a difficult thing because it's not really a specific reason. I mean, they are broadcasting the matches on TV and they are, you know, showing it. But I think social media has played such a big role in like the last 2 years or so. And we've seen it with Ilona Meyer specifically. And I think people want to see more of your personality. People want to see you being active on social media. And yeah, I think it's probably just the marketing side of things. Sometimes I still see matches and I'm like, what? I don't even know they're playing today. And, you know, that's not great and that's not ideal. Whereas I feel like with the USA and the European countries, like they market it so much better. And even with the World Cup, you know, yes, it's a big tournament, but if you don't market it correctly, then no one's going to watch it. And they really put a lot of effort into the Rugby World Cup and, you know, all the coverage around it and all the hype around it, which makes it so much better.
Yeah, you've talked about Elena Marr being that the sort of face of women's rugby, I want to say. But like in terms of like her social activism online and social media, she does talk a lot about body figure and like how rugby is still perceived as like a man's sport, and like women going in those sports is kind of like they shouldn't be in those spaces. What do you think when you hear like maybe man saying, "Oh, rugby is for man, it's not for women"?
I think it's so weird because people have also like asked us this and we've spoken about it in the like WLA program. But I think I've never had that thing of like, I had to remind myself, like, oh, remember, you're a woman in sport. Like, you're actually different from like what they want to see. Um, Whereas, when people say stuff like that, I'm like, well, yeah, like that's still a thing, right? For some people. Because really, like in my mind, I don't ever see it like that. I'm like, we just a bunch of women that love what they do what we love. And there's like men that do what they love. Like, why can't we, like, we also love that. So it's to me, it's sometimes I have to remind myself that, oh yeah, this is different, or people actually frown upon you being in sport. Or I heard this thing. So there's this page, I don't know if you know about it, Lucy, but South Africans are very big on it. It's called Super Rugby. So it's basically, it's like a free betting thing. So you just like bet on your team and you say, not bet on them, but you just predict, like do a prediction, and then you get points off of it. And I performed really well in a pool, but I was the only girl. And someone actually asked, like, who's helping her? And things like that. I was like, do people really think like that? Like, is that really a thing? So, yeah, I think to me, when Elena says things like that, I'm like, I can't believe it's still a thing. Like, we've even had comments like on her side of the rack where people have said like, why are you not in the kitchen? And like the very like 1940s mentality. And it's kind of like water off a duck's back for us, so we don't care about it. But it's sad and it's crazy to see that there's still that mentality out there.
Do you think there's like still structural issues in South Africa that makes it harder for women to get into rugby media?
I think it's very difficult. The opportunities in South Africa are a lot more limited than, say, in the UK. I'd used to like look on the groups where they'd send like the jobs and the positions available, and everything would be in the UK or in Europe. And I'm just like, no, I also want to apply because it's like the perfect job. It's just not an essay. So in essay, I wouldn't say it's limited, but it's kind of more a thing of like, you have to build your resume before they kind of, they don't just like take anyone with like no experience. There used to be a lot of opportunities like in the past where Supersport would have this, it was called like Lady Rugger, and that's where Alma came from. She won the competition, and that's where she actually came from and started her sporting career. But it was very, there's not as many opportunities now. But I think in South Africa it's more a thing of like kind of building up your resume, becoming a content creator, and that way you can kind of maneuver into sports media.
And have you personally faced any challenges while you were interviewing someone before a game or during a game? Like in those, because you do go to men's rugby, have you ever
Mm.
faced like maybe like you said, like comments like girls in the kitchen or like what are you doing here kind of thing? Have you faced those challenges or those comments personally?
I have to say, rugby matches itself, like never. People don't frown upon it. People are very open to chat. And yeah, so at rugby matches and in person, I've never faced that. It's more a thing of online because, it's just easier that way. But in person, like we interview also, like most people that we interview are males, and most of them don't even hesitate to say yes. They just want to know like, where's this going up? Or but they never ask, like, why are you interviewing me? Like, where's the guy? So yeah, no. So luckily, no, I haven't faced that in person at least.
Do you think it's like really important to have like male allies when it comes to like a woman going in like sports media and especially covering like men's rugby? Do you think that's important to have those man allies behind you and also having them supporting you in those spaces?
I think it is important. I think obviously, we're not like as women saying no, we don't need men or we don't want men to be part of like the media, or we don't want to work with men. Um But I think it's just the perception that a lot of men have of us. And I think what's difficult now is I feel like women have so much more to prove. You know, if a male makes a mistake on a player's name or of a score or something, you know, it's kind of just like brushed off and you go on and no one remembers it. Whereas if a female makes the same mistake, it's kind of like, but she doesn't even know what she's talking about because she said that. You know, she can't even get the names of the players right, and you know, things like that. So I think it's a lot harder for women to prove ourselves, and I think we are just like scrutinized for our mistakes, whereas men are a little more like people are a lot more lenient towards them.
And like a part of like your side job is like, especially with like social media like TikTok, Instagram. Do you think social media is trying to level the playing field, or is it just as tough online as it is on the field with women going in sports media?
I think definitely social media have helped a lot, and I think social media kind of gave me the platform to, you know, do interviews and post interviews. And I think there's also a lot more things online about women being in a male dominated space, whether it be sport or media or you know, whatever the type of industry or whatever the type of department in sport. So I think social media is definitely contributing positively to that. Obviously, as I've mentioned, there is like the negative stuff that will always be there. But yeah, I think if you look at like the players on social media and their coverage and like the Women's Rugby World Cup now, like it's really we're really progressing, I think.
Have you got like any favorite like followers or like players you would recommend for our listeners to look at?
Would you say in women's rugby or males rugby?
Men's rugby, women's rugby, whatever you want.
Yeah, so in women's rugby, I think there are a lot of players to look out for in the Rugby World Cup, and I don't want people to come at me because I know Tash made a video and people were like, "What about this person and this person?" Like, there's a lot of good players.
What's your
I'm
opinion?
not saying these are the only good players. I'm just saying they are the ones to look out for. But I mean, of course, we've spoken about Ilona Meyer. I mean, she's obviously the name to look out for, but I don't think she needs any introduction. People know who she is.
I do.
Yeah. And then Stacey Waka from the Black Ferns. There's also a lot of the Aussie players that I think you need to look out for. And there's a lot of the Red Roses players as well. Um, yeah, like you have to forgive me, but I don't know all of the players' names. I'm also very, very much a newbie in like this women rugby World Cup thing. So I'm just as excited for the World Cup as most of the people. But I think if I can say like the teams to look out for is definitely going to be the Black Ferns, the Red Roses. I think France is also going to be a strong competitor, and I think Canada. I think people might underestimate Canada, but I think they're definitely going to be a strong, strong contender in this year's World Cup.
Would you say that when you were younger, did you have all those female role models to look at, or was it just like men's rugby when you were younger, even like in sports media, but also athletes? I'm thinking when I watched rugby, it was mostly my grandpa was Welsh. It was like James Hirks, so I got a red card.
Mhm.
But like Dan Carter for like the All Blacks was like the major one, and like a few Springbok players. But I didn't definitely grew up with like women's rugby or like even women being in those men's rugby commentary or pundits. Like, did you have someone in South Africa, or was it like similar to my experience when I was younger?
Definitely, I think it was definitely a lot similar to your experience, especially when I was way, way younger. Like, it was only males, like, not even like the pundits, media, it was all males. I think the first woman that I got introduced to in sport and sports media was Alma Smith. And I remember like looking at her and I was like, that's so cool, you know, like she's like the first woman in sport, like in South Africa. And I think she's really someone that I looked up to. But like now in recent years, I think there are a lot of women in sport in South Africa. Yes, there are a lot of good rugby players like Nadine Ruiz, Jackie Sillier, Boy, like there's a lot of good players, but I think like most of them work in sports media, the ones that I look up to, because ultimately that's where we want to be. But it's like Mochadise Maono, she was also on like the WLA, like the last the graduation episode. And yeah, Alma, and there are a few that might not be internationally known, but Bernice Marie de Toy. So yeah, there's a lot of role models. So now you can actually kind of, people represent you, which is like great.
And if you could like change one thing about how rugby is covered in South Africa, what would it be?
Yeah, I think as I've mentioned, like the media coverage, like the social media coverage end of things, I think definitely needs to change and definitely needs to be looked at, just in terms of like giving more coverage to women's rugby. I think men's rugby obviously like gets covered widespread and like on social media on all platforms. But yeah, I think women's rugby definitely needs that like marketing boost. And yes, it might take a while to get there, but I think it requires the same attention. And then I also think on like another note, I think club rugby in South Africa also needs to be promoted more. So not so like the Bulls, Sharks, like those clubs, but like the club rugby, So I think the schoolboy rugby in South Africa is also very big. There are some big rivalries in SA schools. But I think some of the talent goes lost in club rugby because it's like not there's no coverage for it on TV or broadcasting. So yeah, I think obviously, like I said, there's a big focus on your school rugby or your provincial teams, which is great. And obviously, we don't have a shortage of talent. But I think there are some talent that also go lost in transit with the club rugby not being broadcast.
So would you say like visibility in sports is like both
Yeah.
on and off the field matters really to like how the sport is perceived by people?
For sure, I think we've seen like with women rugby as well, just like Alona Mar posting more about it got people into it. And you might not understand, she said, you might not understand it the first time that you watch it, but like keep like watching it, like you're just gonna get more into it and you're just gonna love it even more. So yeah, I definitely think the visibility is a big thing because sometimes even if I see so in South Africa, we call it soccer. I know you call it football, but so it's big in parts of South Africa, and like some people watch the Premier League, but they don't watch like the local derbies and stuff. But sometimes even when I see like football memes or football reels, like that's the stuff that gets you into watching football or Formula One or whatever the sport might be. So I think that's why visibility is so important.
Do you think like especially with like women's sports in general, do you feel like going from the grassroots up is the way to go in terms of visibility but also participation rates?
For sure. And I think Nadine Roos, which is the scrum half for the Springboks, she mentioned in an interview the other day, and she said they asked her like what is her dream for women's rugby, and she said she just wish and hope that it actually starts at like a school level, because currently we don't have like teams for girls like in high school or at university level. And so I think that's probably also something that needs to, as you've mentioned, from grassroots level up.
And is that what keeps you hopeful in a way for like more visibility in sports media, but also women going in those male dominated spaces?
Sure, because I think if there are more women's teams, like ultimately there's going to be more women in sport. So, and South Africa like to draw people that were already in sport into like being pundits and into being presenters and so I think yeah, we will definitely see a lot of positives from that.
And have you got like one particular moment, even if it's like before, during, or after a match, which was like, this is your moment where you thought, yes, I can do it?
That's actually so crazy. I think
Like your best moments interviewing
yeah.
someone or a group of people, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, I do have one actually. Like there's one that comes to mind when you said group of people. I was like, yes. So when we were at the Springboks versus Italy match, I think I had this like moment where I sat there and I thought to myself, like, you know, a year ago, I sat here at the same place and I was watching rugby. I had no idea that a year later, like even though I don't formally work in rugby, like that I would be interviewing people. Like even just, the confidence to actually go to people and ask, like, do you want to do an interview? Like that's definitely not the person that I was a year ago. And I think it was such a surreal moment, like standing there and being like, I'm here with the mic, like busy recording. This is gonna go on social media. Like it was just, yeah, I think it was one of those pinch me moments where you're like, I used to only watch Springbok rugby. Now I'm trying to like cover it in a way that makes it fun for people to watch or that hopefully draws people to watch more rugby. And yeah, I think my favorite group of people that I interviewed and another pinch me moment was Joanne de Jong and Rudy Page. So they have their own podcast Behind the Ruck. And they were actually busy interviewing people for Supersport. And I saw them and I was like, what if I just go up to them with their mic, like with my mic, and they have a mic? Like, how funny would it be if I'm like, I know you want to ask us a question, but can I ask you a question? And I just took the chance and they were so friendly, like, didn't even think twice about like coming for an interview. And they were the best sports ever. And I think that to me was kind of like, okay, like, I can actually do this. And we posted the full interview on YouTube, so it's there like to watch and for everyone. But I think that was like a very surreal moment. Like I remember watching it like 5 times or something the next day, and I was like, did this really happen? Like this can't be.
You did it, which is fab. And like, I would be so proud of you of doing that because it does take like guts, especially as a woman and a girl, to actually go forward to people and like be like, yes, I can do this. So you've proven that definitely to like all the girls and women in the sports media as well. So like a pat on your back there.
That's so sweet, Lucy. That really means a lot. I'm even blushing.
And like, as a final question, what's the one message you'd give to young girls dreaming of working in sport?
Yeah, I think there are so many different opportunities in sports, and I would say I think I have like a few things, but I think one of the things would be like don't be afraid to reach out to people. We've seen so much success on the WLA groups of people who came back and said they took the leap, they messaged someone in the industry that they really wanted to work with, and there's come like so much success out of it. So everywhere that you go, look for opportunities. If you want to work in content creation, start creating content. It can be team reviews, it can be prediction videos, it can be fun little hopping on trends, but making it about the sport that you want to work in. Really tailor it, obviously, to the industry in the sports sector that you want to work in. But other than that, also just like start and just go for it. Like you never know what can come from it. And like there's nothing bad actually that can come from it. I think if anyone can take it from anyone, it's from us. Like we took the leap to literally start a podcast about rugby, and we thought we were going to get so much flack about it and so much hate. And as I've mentioned, yes, there are one or two comments, but the positives really outweigh the negatives. Just start, don't give up, and really follow your dream. If that's something that you want to do, look for networking opportunities, connect with like-minded women, connect with other people in sports, and yeah, honestly, just go for it. You really have nothing to lose.
That's lovely to end this episode on with your lovely advice, Bernice. I would equal the same thing in the sense that, like, go on, girls, do it. I think loads of girls support other girls, which is really nice in the women's sports sector. So, yeah, I would definitely echo what you just said. And it's a fabulous way to close the episode. And, like, thank you very much, Bernice, for coming. And also, like, I think we reminded, like, the progress in women's sports, whether it's on the pitch, on the field, or behind the camera. I think it's also collective, messy, and ongoing. It's still going up, and it's not reached the ultimum, I would say. Speaking of like women making history, this Friday, the Red Roses kick off their Rugby World Cup campaign against the USA. If you are in England, go and support them. We've seen on the WLA group that some girls are already in Sunderland, which is where the match is going. But if you're in London, Manchester, wherever you are, even in the US, but also for our listeners in South Africa, the Springbok women take on Brazil this Sunday. Another huge moment for the game. And for the next time and for the next episode, it will be your host, Tash, that takes a mic for a powerful episode. I signed a birthright at 16. Do I regret it? An intimate conversation about motherhood, feminism, and climate anxiety. Until then, stay grounded, stay questioning, and keep showing up imperfectly. Thank you. Bye.